Joe Biden gave a talk this morning, blamed everybody else on inflation. He took no responsibility and has no plan. I think what all Floridians know is this president has no ability to deal with inflation.
I will tell you is the president's phrase, and the president made those comments himself just last week, as you know. And I think what has struck him is how extreme some of the policies and proposals are that a certain wing of the Republican Party that is taking up too much of the Republican Party.
And I agree with what Chairman Powell said last week, that the number one threat is the strength, and that strength that we build is inflation. So the Fed should...
I've taken all of the nicotine.
You can stay right here, please.
Also on aisle 1.
A lot going on. Joe Biden addressed inflation. Jen Psaki's encouraging protesters outside of SCOTUS's house. Crime is on the rise. All that and more coming up on this episode of Daily Caller Live. Oh, this is going to be a doozy. Daily Caller Live starts right now.
2, 1. Here we go!
That might be the only brown guy on earth named Jobob.
That is actually her name, Jobob.
Live from the dingy bunker, completely cut off from the outside world, except for you fine folks. My name is Jobob. This is Daily Caller Live. Thanks so much for tuning in on today. It is May, 11th, 2022, the year of our Lord 2022. New you in 22. Not new inflation numbers by any stretch of the imagination. Inflation continues to be on the rise at like 8.6%. And I hate to belabor on that, but it's not good. I'm trying to figure out which one to go with first. Let's go with Joe Biden first, because I feel like there's some clips from Joe Biden talking about inflation and the economy and getting a lot of things wrong, as he often does. We've got Senator Rick Scott too talking about this after this. So check out this Joe Biden clip and let me know what you think. We'll discuss on the other side.
And I agree with what Chairman Powell said last week, that the number one threat is the strength, and that strength that we build is inflation. So the Fed should...
Okay, sorry, not the wrong clip, but that was a clip that was supposed to play after that. But that's Joe Biden saying just doing his particular bumble and stumble and run, where he says something that doesn't really make any sense because he got lost in his place when he was talking. And he said something along the lines of inflation is our biggest problem. I agree with Chairman Powell is that our strength is, and then it went off the rails from there. Anyways, here is now Joe Biden talking about a broader scope of the economy and all of that sort of good stuff with regards to the quote-unquote ultra MAGA side of the aisle that Joe Biden is now pushing and the Democrats are now pushing. Watch this.
Republicans kind of want to make, and Congress want to make Medicare's very existence up for vote over and over again, along with Social Security and Medicaid. Really, ask yourself, how well are we going to sleep at night knowing that every 5 years, MAGA Republicans, if they're still the Republican, this, as I said, this is not your father's Republican Party, if we're going to have to vote on whether you will have Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and what amounts you'll have in each of those programs. You know what they're likely to do? Use them as hostages every 5 years to get their way on other things. Think about it.
Okay, so the president is talking about some legislation being put on the table to combat the terribleness that is Medicaid and Medicare. Medicare is worse healthcare for more Americans. That's just what it is. We can talk about the healthcare system in the United States as a whole and how the United States government, when it pays on Medicaid or Medicare, does not pay the full freight, and therefore private insurance holders have to subsidize the cost of the lack of money from the government. We talk about all of that. But basically what Joe Biden is doing, what Democrats are now doing, is calling this the quote-unquote ultra MAGA wing of the Republican Party. And they're trying to categorize this specifically as this is the entire Republican Party. They're ultra MAGA. It's not your father's Republican Party anymore. When in actuality, it's what it seems like is freaking finally somebody's trying to take some sort of fiscal responsibility for the craziness that is government spending. Rush Limbaugh used to say all the time that neither party cares about financially sound decisions anymore. He tends to be right. There's a saying, Democrats spend your money, Republicans lie about it. Seems to ring pretty true, except for now, the Senator Scott, who we'll hear from in just a second, people are talking about maybe we should look at the effectiveness and the efficiency of Medicare and Medicaid, which again are terribly run programs, just like the VA is at the federal government level. Hey, maybe we should stop wasting money on that. Now Joe Biden is saying, well, this is a problem that we can't have people even questioning the ability of Medicare and Medicaid. That's not going to work. It's all politics. It's all trying to position on how they're going to save any skin they have left in the midterms. Here's Rick Scott talking about this, and then we got Psaki talking about the quote unquote ultra MAGA craziness that the Biden administration is pushing. Watch this.
Joe Biden gave a talk this morning, blamed everybody else on inflation. He took no responsibility and has no plan. I think what all Floridians know is this president has no ability to deal with inflation. In the private sector, when you have a CEO that doesn't have the ability to deal with something, they resign. They go on and do something else. Joe Biden ought to do the exact same thing, and that's the only way we're ever going to get inflation under control in this country.
So that, again, is Rick Scott talking about the president yesterday when he gave his speech and said he basically blamed everybody else, blamed the ultra MAGA side of the Republican Party, which is, again, they're trying to categorize as the entire Republican Party. Because MAGA is apparently a bad word when you're in your super lefty circles. But I want to get to, so with this idea of the whole ultra MAGA messaging that the White House is trying to put out, I want to get to this with Jen Psaki yesterday. Brief transition, I think, if these clips are lined up correctly, which who knows? Maybe I misplaced them. But if these clips are lined up correctly, this is Jen Psaki talking about the SCOTUS protests outside of people's houses, outside of the justices' houses. We'll talk about it after this. Watch this clip.
So I know that there's an outrage right now, I guess, about protests that have been peaceful to date, and we certainly continue to encourage that outside of judges' homes, and that's the president's position.
So Jen Psaki saying they certainly intend to or hope to encourage protests outside of judges' homes. That's the president's position. Want to get to this. 18 U.S. Code 507. Whoever, with the intent of influencing any judge in the discharge of his or her duty, pickets or parades in or near a building or residence occupied or used by such a judge shall be fined under this title or imprisoned. So what the Biden administration is apparently encouraging is illegal, according to U.S. law. So there's that. Now I want to talk about this MAGA thing, this ultra MAGA thing. Jen Psaki was asked about it yesterday, saying, hey, what's the deal? Like, what's going on with this idea of this MAGA, ultra MAGA messaging that you guys are trying to do? And she, well, I'm not going to categorize what she said. I'm just going to play her answer. Watch this.
There's a question on messaging. Who came up with this phrase ultra MAGA? Why the need to kick it up a notch? Well, MAGA wasn't enough. I mean, why now use this phrase?
I will tell you is the president's phrase, and the president made those comments himself just last week, as you know. And I think what has struck him is how extreme some of the policies and proposals are that a certain wing of the Republican Party that is taking up too much of the Republican Party are for and are advocating for. And you've heard the president talk about this. But it's not just obviously putting at risk a woman's right to make choices about her own health care. It It is also, as you heard him talk about this morning, Rick Scott's extreme plan that will raise taxes on 75 million Americans making less than $100,000 a year. It is Rick Scott's plan to get rid of, eliminate, that's what sunset means, get rid of, Medicare and Social Security, something people over 70 in this country rely on. And it's also the obsession with culture wars and wars against Mickey Mouse and banning books. President thinks that's extreme. That is not what the American people care about or what they want. And so to him, adding a little ultra to it, give it a little extra pop.
So from a messaging standpoint, in terms of winning elections, this is probably one of the worst things that Democrats could do in trying to categorize people who are making reasonable claims extremists. Like we talked about earlier, the sunsetting of Medicaid and Medicare would honestly probably be a good thing for most people. It would be kind of sucky in the short term, but in the long run, especially given the fact that the government doesn't reimburse the full freight of any sort of Medicare provided to the people who are on those government systems, probably would be a good idea. But I wanted to read this. This is actually fascinating. This is an opinion piece printed in the LA Times. And when I say printed, I mean published on their website, because I do not know a single person who reads print newspaper anymore. Maybe that's you. If that's you, let me know in the comment section. This is printed in the LA Times. Akbarian, I think that's the author's name. Abortion rights activists are targeting Supreme Court justices' homes. That's fine by me. Again, an opinion piece in the LA Times that they ran. A couple phrases from that article. So when I hear people freaking out about Saturday's peaceful protests in front of Chevy Chase, Maryland, the Chevy Chase, Maryland homes of Justice John Roberts and Brett Kavanaugh, or a vigil Monday evening in front of Justice Samuel Alito's home in Alexandria, Virginia, I just can't get too worked up about it. All right, so the LA Times publishing an opinion piece saying that, well, I'm fine with protesting outside of Justice's house, even though we just read the U.S. code that said that's not cool and shouldn't be allowed. Not shouldn't be allowed, is definitely illegal. But the LA Times running with an opinion piece saying that's fine by this particular opinionated author. There was another, was it George Washington University? There was some law professor that said, well, if the protesters are right, then they absolutely can do whatever they want. We won't get into how ridiculous that statement is as of yet. I want to keep reading on to this. Sure, it's unnerving. This is, again, an opinion piece from the LA Times. Sure, it's unnerving to be picketed at home, but that's life in a mostly free society. Police were on the scene. Protesters were relatively low-key. Okay, so we're cool with setting this sort of precedent, dude. Not to mention the legality of it, because I already have, but just setting the cultural precedent of if you don't like something, you can pick it outside of somebody's house. And then what happens if one thing goes wrong? You're going to end up with people dead. That's what's going to happen. There's no way to stop the inevitability of somebody getting hurt by these sorts of things. Because if it's anything like we've seen, you take it and you ratchet it up a notch and you keep going. That's exactly what we saw with the protests throughout 2020 and into 2021. I would imagine people that thought that it was okay to storm the Capitol looked at a bunch of the protests around the country and this seems fine. This is probably okay for us to do, because nobody got prosecuted throughout the entire country when streets were burning down and businesses were burning down and cars were on fire and people were protesting throughout the streets violently, those quote unquote mostly peaceful protests. So look, dude, from the LA Times, in the LA Times, if you're going to advocate for this sort of thing, just understand that when it all goes to hell, you're going to be the one to blame. He continues, on Alito's block, the protesters were even lighthearted with some trolling chanted, "I bet he likes Nickelback," a reference to the office. This is, if you don't know the Nickelback thing, you don't know. Then he goes on to say if they'd been able to protest outside the Supreme Court itself, perhaps the protesters would not have targeted the justice's neighborhood in the first place. But that was not an option. Again, talking about the fences around the actual Supreme Court. He goes on. I'm not going to read any more of that because I think you get the picture and you understand the idea. But again, the White House yesterday backing this idea of encouraging peaceful protests outside of the Supreme Court justices' homes. So there's that. And speaking of crime, because like we mentioned by that law that is a crime, San Francisco crime is skyrocketing. And I only bring this up. I understand that people are watching from everywhere. There's people from Texas, Utah, around the country. Everybody, every state, I'm sure, is represented at least some point. Also, if you haven't already, click the little like button, click the little share button. Would appreciate you doing so. Helps us out and helps us reach more people. All of that sort of stuff. And I feel like this is a pertinent story for the rest of the country. I'm a fan of the laboratories of democracy that are the United States or are supposed to be the United States. States kind of operating independently of each other and definitely independently of the federal government and kind of seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work. One of those laboratories of democracies that has shown us time and time again what doesn't work is San Francisco, California, or California as a whole, San Francisco specifically. Here's some clips of how brazen thieves have gotten in the San Francisco area. You may have seen these types of videos before, but I just wanted to get this out there to explain to people around the country that this is coming to wherever you live if you allow the ridiculous policies of your super woke DAs, sheriffs. Can't imagine there's many woke sheriffs, but legislature, city council people, school board members. This is what you're going to get more of if you allow it to come to your neck of the woods. Watch this.
I've taken all of the nicotine.
You can stay right here, please.
Also on aisle 1. Code 99, code 99.
You're just listening on the podcast. Sorry, there's people just ravaging a store, going through all of the behind the counter cabinets and just walking out. Nobody does anything.
Get a job.
Nobody does anything. Nobody says anything. In California specifically, there's laws like AB 109, Prop 47, Prop 57. Again, I don't want to get into the weeds of California laws that are on the books, but those laws make it pretty much entirely legal to steal anything up to $950. Anything under that is like a traffic ticket, which criminals don't pay traffic tickets. If you don't serve jail time, they're not going to bother with it at all. So the idea of showing that video again to a national audience is you need to understand the woke ideas of legislators around the country are coming to your neighborhood if you don't stop it first. This is just San Francisco, but San Francisco elected the most woke DA I think the country has ever seen. This guy named Chesa Boudin, who is up for recall, by the way. But like I said, this sort of stuff can spread to your part of the country if you allow it to. Crime is up at almost 10% in San Francisco, which crime was already terrible before this. But it's up almost 10%. Violent crime is up. Property crime is up. The light at the end of the tunnel, I think here, especially in the city of San Francisco, is this. Polls came out. The DA who doesn't prosecute people like you just saw in the video is up for recall on June 7th. The big poll number is 57% of residents plan to vote for the recall on June 7th. And less than a quarter, 22% plan to reject the call, and 21% are undecided. Those are pretty bad poll numbers if you're trying to keep your job as the San Francisco district attorney. So there is that. I want to go back to this really quick. I know we're repeating not repeating, but if you've been watching the entire time, I appreciate it. I want to hit on this one more time because I saw a big jump here on people talking or people watching this. So I want to play this clip again from the president. And ask this question. Is Joe Biden going to stake his political future on bad government structures? Let me rephrase that. Are Democrats and the president going to run on defending severely inefficient programs run by the federal government? Watch this clip from Joe Biden.
Republicans kind of want to make, and Congress want to make Medicare's very existence up for vote over and over again, along with Social Security and Medicaid. Really, ask yourself, how well are we going to sleep at night knowing that every 5 years, MAGA Republicans, if they're still the Republican, this, as I said, this is not your father's Republican Party, if we're going to have to vote on whether you will have Social Security, Medicare and Medicaid, and what amounts you'll have in each of those programs. You know what they're likely to do? Use them as hostages every 5 years to get their way on other things. Think about it.
So there is a proposal out saying, hey, maybe we should sunset some of these programs because, one, they're losing money, two, they're inefficient, and three, they don't help in the way that we think they're helping. Medicare and Medicaid, if you don't know this, interesting fun fact, well, aside from the fact that it's just generally worse healthcare for more people, Medicare and Medicaid patients and the healthcare provided to those patients don't pay the full amount. It usually is anywhere between 60 and 70%. And what that means is somebody on Medicaid or a federal government issued healthcare goes to see a doctor. The government doesn't pay the full price. They pay a discounted rate, again, between 60 and 70%, which means the healthcare provider is forced to upcharge a bunch of the other people who are paying on the private insurance side. So private insurance is subsidizing Medicare and Medicaid already, not to mention the fact that it's by taxpayer dollars, which really is just more debt that is accumulating through the taxpayers will eventually have to pay back. So these are inefficient programs. It's usually worse healthcare for more people, and there's no competition model, and also the private sector people are forced to pay more, not only in taxes, but also in subsidizing the healthcare provided to people on Medicaid and Medicare. So maybe if you go back to a straight competition model, maybe that'll help. So it's an interesting thing to just at the very least discuss. And maybe if the only thing you get out of it is an overhaul, that doesn't seem bad either. Maybe they should overhaul Medicaid, Medicare. Maybe they should overhaul the VA. Maybe they should overhaul Social Security, which Joe Biden also pointed out. If you also don't know this about Social Security, people pay into Social Security just like they would a 401k, or just like, well, not just like they would in a 401k, because Social Security you're paid into by the point of a gun. So it's different in that way. Social Security as a fund does terribly compared to all of the other funds. If you have a retirement fund, that fund is generally in the market and making money back and in super, super safe investments. And at the end of your working career and when you go into retirement, you should be able to tap into your 401k and get money back because somebody has been investing it, or it's been invested at a pretty good rate of return in very, very safe investments. Social Security is the same thing, except for it earns like 1% a year. So the entire country is putting money into this fund, and then the fund is being managed so poorly, as everything else by the federal government is, that it's only earning about 1%. Now, to keep that in reference, inflation now is at like 8.5% year over year, but a standard inflation is kept at 2%. So even if it's 1% in a normal inflation year, you're still losing half your money just by the cost of inflation, or just by the cost of inflation. I'm not entirely sure if that made sense. I get heated about this sort of stuff because government programs, especially from the federal government, don't freaking work, and nobody wants to revise them. So maybe Joe Biden, maybe Democrats, maybe you shouldn't stake your entire claim on programs that are inefficient and don't work. I'm going to stop there. I feel like my heart rate went up a little bit ranting about that. So yeah, that's going to do it for us today. We're trying some new things out here on the Daily Caller live show. I'm a little bit more casual today, if you haven't noticed. If you haven't already, give me a follow on any of your social media platforms at JOBOB, pretty much anywhere. You should be able to find me. Would appreciate a follow, and also respect the DMs. I appreciate everybody sending me stuff, and I honestly do get some stories from my social media accounts, but please don't send me anything and everything you come across here. This guy sends me like 20 messages a day. Like, dude, send me stuff, but not that much. Anyways, that's going to do it for us today. We'll see you tomorrow. Anything else happening tomorrow? Oh, yeah, we're doing the Daily Caller live show, same time, same place, but also going to be on the TPUSA couch tomorrow afternoon. So appreciate you sticking around, tuning in. If you're watching on really any of the platforms, I think they're going to take the Joe Biden is doing 2 speeches today. So stick around for those. Those should be broadcast live. Maybe we'll hop on here and just do it live, comment on it while it's happening in real time. Maybe we'll do that. Yeah, that's it. We'll see you tomorrow. God bless America.